Welcome to the Joyful Frugalista, the podcast that's all about living a richer life with less. I'm your host, Serina Bird, author and passionate frugalista. Each episode, we dive into inspiring stories, practical tips and joyful conversations that help you create abundance, embrace mindful spending, and live your best life, all without breaking the bank. So grab a cuppa, get comfy, and let's explore how being a frugalista can lead to freedom, happiness, and a whole lot of joy. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice. Please consult a qualified professional before making financial decisions. Hello, frugalistas, and welcome to today's episode. Today I have a special guest, and of course, all of my guests are special. Today we are going to talk about startup investing and retirement by someone who has really inspired me, especially when it comes to startups and angel investing. But first, if you love this podcast and find it useful, please pay it forward by liking or commenting. And also join the Joyful Frugalista Facebook group to join in on discussions with like-minded frugalistas. Nick McNaughton describes himself as retired, and I'm using that term loosely because anyone who knows him would say he's simply entered a new, more self-directed chapter of curiosity and creativity. After decades as one of Canberra's most influential innovation leaders, and actually I would say you probably still are an influential innovation leader, investor, mentor, venture fund CEO, and ecosystem builder, Nick has stepped back from formal roles to explore life on his own terms. So how in retirement, Nick has launched a new YouTube channel, Max.Trax.Relax, where he documents adventures, experiments, and reflections, including a retirement series. So welcome, Nick. I'm really enjoying your new YouTube series. The retirement work, but also the cycling work. And we are definitely going to be talking about that in this podcast.
Thanks for having me on the podcast, Serina.
You're welcome. It's such an honor. But first, so how did you first become involved in innovation in startups? Was it something you always wanted to do, or did you just kind of fall into it?
I kind of fell into it. So when I was getting started in my career, it was really at the dawn of the personal computer. And there was an explosion in companies that created software for the personal computer. And I was fortunate that I'd just finished my degree at university, which was in computing in business. And I had an opportunity to join that wave. And really my big break came when I started working for American tech companies and started to see how quickly they became successful globally.
Wow. So now, would it be fair to say that when you were studying and first working in computing, it wasn't as big as an industry as it is now?
No, it was very embryonic. And but the beauty of this was that once you have a platform, a technology platform, that you can be as creative as you want to be, whether it's creating a word processor, a spreadsheet, a database, or graphics. Literally, there were thousands of entrepreneurs around the world who went, this is a platform I can write code on and create software and make money from. And so what I saw and witnessed and was part of was this first wave of entrepreneurs who were software entrepreneurs, leveraging the power of the platform of a personal computer with millions of buyers all over the globe wanting to buy their software. And at the time, it was distributed on floppy disks and CDs eventually. And literally, it was a bit like buying records. You know, you would buy the code for the program, plug it into your computer, upload it, and run it from the computer. But this fascinated me because I saw young people like me becoming very successful and very wealthy from following their passion and creating companies around these software products that went on to be globally successful. And eventually what happens, Serina, is there's a consolidation phase where the bigger fish buy the medium-sized fish and the medium-sized fish buy the little fish. And you could be an individual coder and eventually get bought by one of those middle-sized fish, but set yourself up financially for the rest of your life. And I was intrigued by that and kind of thought that would be interesting for something to get involved with.
So how did you then get involved in investing in other people's startups, like not just your own?
It took a while, Serina. So I spent 16 years working for American tech companies, three of them. The first was obviously Apple, and I ran Asia Pacific for Claris, their software subsidiary. Then I heard about the internet, and the internet was just coming as the second major wave after personal computers. And I saw the people that I looked up to in the industry jumping ship and moving to, .com one companies, internet companies. And my old boss, actually, a guy called David Orfeo, had moved from being my boss at Claris, and he became the CEO of a Boston-based company called Cold Fusion. And they had a tool that allowed web developers to create interactive, dynamic websites. And at the time, in 1997, this was incredibly revolutionary. So I moved on to join David at that company running Asia Pacific again. We listed on NASDAQ very soon after I joined, a couple of years after I joined, and that gave my wife and I the financial capacity to become what's called angel investors. Now, angel investors are people who are high net worth individuals. They've had a chance to pay off their mortgage, and they've got 10% of their net wealth that becomes play money that they can afford to lose, but they can afford to invest in the future of other technologists. And in 1998, Marion and I made our first investment in our first startup, and that's how it all began.
Full name, the angel investors, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know where it came from. I think that if you talk to any technologist, having someone come through the door with money and belief is almost like a epiphany in terms of a religious experience. They suddenly have someone who arrives in their world and helps them with support and money. So maybe that's where the name came from.
Yeah, but it's more than money, isn't it? Like, and I know from, speaking to you previously, a lot of your work isn't just the cash. I mean, the cash is very significant, especially at an early stage, but it's more than that.
It is. I think the experience, the networks, the introductions you can give, the guidance, the advice, the mentoring that you can give is more valuable than the money, Serina. And I was fortunate that I had probably 20 years of my professional career under my belt before we started to go on this journey. And that expertise, I hadn't realized that my network and my expertise and my experience in particular, winning business in greenfield areas. So I always pick businesses that were at the cutting edge of a new technology wave. And when you're selling into that market, you're largely having to convince people who have never bought that product or service before to believe in you and your capability and transact with you for the first time. And that's essentially what startup founders do. They have a new idea. They believe that there is a problem that their product or service solves. And the first hard thing is persuading companies to buy that product or service to solve a problem that they have. And in the early days, that is the hardest thing to do. First of all, you're educating the community about why this particular product or service needs to be in place. And then it's persuading what are called early adopters to embrace you as an individual, trust you as an individual, and believe that your solution can solve their problem. And that is really the hard part for an entrepreneur. Winning their very first beachhead customers or their very first 5 customers is the very hardest thing to do.
And so, what would you tell a startup founder or founders when they're going through this? Like, what kind of advice would you give them in terms of getting those first customers?
I have a number of phrases that I repeat with all of my founders. One is activity equals results. So you have to keep on getting up every day, making calls, sending emails, reaching out to new people that you don't know, in the belief that your message will resonate with them and pique their interest to say, yes, I want to have a conversation with this individual. And so activity equals results. And I found during my career as a salesperson that the harder I worked, the luckier I got, Serina. So the more emails I sent, the more phone calls I made, the more text I sent, the more LinkedIn connections I had, my hit rate would increase. And so once you've got through the barrier of actually having a conversation like we're having today, I can listen to the individual. I can understand what their problems are. I can refine the message that I'm giving back to them. And hopefully we can reach a point where they go, actually, we would like to trial or pilot your technology. And so it's all about those skills. Those skills were drilled into me working for American tech companies. And the reason America is the heart of technology and innovation in the world, in the Western world today, is not just because they're great technologists, but they're great technology marketers. So they have methodologies, they have incentives, they indoctrinate their employees. And I was literally brainwashed every time I joined a new company. They would take you over to the US for new hire training. You would be part of a cohort of new staff that are being trained. I call it indoctrination. And you'd come away as a believer. You would believe that this was the best thing that had ever happened on earth. And you would want to work 7 days a week to evangelize that to your customers around the globe. And I love doing it, but it's an all-in experience. You can't do this early stage stuff half-heartedly. It's all in. And there's a price to pay for that. The price is family time, social time, etc. Because the founders that are the most successful in the early years are the ones who are the most dedicated.
Wow, it's quite different from Australia's traditional kind of laid-back approach.
We could do a whole podcast on that. Yes, agreed.
Culturally different. So looking back on your investing career, when you are looking at startups to invest in, so what kind of qualities are you looking for? Like particularly in terms of founders, or are there particular segments that you are interested in? So what are you looking for?
So I like what's called applied technology opportunities, Serina, which is taking existing proven technologies and applying them in a new or novel way or in a new or novel market. And that might be a little bit difficult for your listeners to understand, but as an example, the very first angel investment deal that we did, my wife and I, was a company in Sydney called Soulmates. And I knew the idea person, Martin Haynes. He came to one of the user groups for Cold Fusion, and he believed that the internet was going to disrupt matchmaking. We're talking about personals, we're talking about dating,
Mm-hmm.
and he realized that we were going to go from small ads in newspapers to ads and profiles being put up on the internet. And he realized very early on that this internet could be used for this. I said to Martin, Martin, can you confirm with me that this has family values? Our principle is family values, which he did. And he asked me who was the best web developer in Australia. And I happened to know who they were because I'd worked for a layer in Cold Fusion. I introduced him to Daniel Hay, who was, in my opinion, the best developer in Australia. The two of them got together, created this personals company, and became hugely successful. So they ran personals for all of the MSN franchises around the world. They started with 9 MSN, and we persuaded them to use us as their back-end provider. And then over the next 18 months, we won, Italy, France, Germany, Brazil, Thailand, Vietnam, etc., and got sold 3.5 years later to the owner of Match.com, which was the number
Wow.
one personals company in the world. So that deal, Serina, first investment 1998, and we were sold in very early 2002 for $41 million. So I kind of realized you can make amazing successes very quickly from angel investing in technology in the right place at the right time.
it sounds fairly logical now because now we see Tinder and we see Bumble and we see everything else. I met my husband on RSVP, so I definitely have used the services. But for so long, there was so much stigma about online dating, like real concerns about fraud and a range of things. So back then when you were making that investment, it was still considered a little bit risky, I guess.
It was. In fact, we competed with RSVP. So RSVP basically had a model which was they would attract the user traffic. In those days, Serina, we called it eyeballs. And we decided we were going to have a different approach. We were going to be a back-end provider. So we were going to use our application and plug it into sites that already had traffic or eyeballs. So we basically said, let's go and talk to Yahoo and 9MSN who already had traffic and said, let us run your personals business for you as a white label provider. So even though we were in the same era and vintage as RSVP, we had very different approaches. The other thing that we did differently was family values. So we actually had an army of curators who looked at every single profile to make sure that there was no offensive images or no offensive language. And we did that manually, that curation. So nothing went live that was offensive or inappropriate. And we also had a philosophy of multilingual from the get-go. And, that's down to Daniel Hayes' genius. Unfortunately, he's passed away due to cancer. But he was a real genius who thought through how we globalize this business. And as I say, in 4 years, we became one of the global leaders in this and had literally tens of millions of profiles on the platform when we sold to Match.com.
And no doubt are responsible for many happy families and couples as
Yeah,
well.
I'll tell a story to your listeners. That I'm not going to name the individual investor because they're a very high-profile Australian, but they were a little bit unconvinced that this new way of matchmaking would work, and they called in their EA, who I will call Sue. She wasn't called Sue. And said, Sue, are you seeing anybody at the moment? And she said, you can't ask me that, but no, I'm not. And this person said, Sue, why don't you put your profile up on this site and see what happens? So Sue put her profile up there. And like you, Serina, she met the man of her dreams and married him 6 months later. And at that point, that individual made a pretty big investment in the company.
Well, yeah, it works, right? So,
It does.
as
It does.
people's how we socialize has changed, and so it makes sense that how we meet people has changed as well. So, I know you've had a huge impact on Canberra's innovation ecosystem, and it's something that you are really passionate about. So, what is so special or unique about Canberra for entrepreneurship?
Most people don't realise, but there are 5 universities in Canberra. Most people could name the top 3, which is ANU, University of Canberra, UNSW, ADFA. But there's
Mhm.
also Charles Sturt University have a campus and Australian Catholic University have a campus. On top of that, Serina, we've got thousands of CSIRO employees in our city as well. So we are a hotbed of research and innovation. So first and foremost, we've got bright people thinking about the future of humanity. That is a great hotbed for startups. So we already had the underlying infrastructure, if you like, in terms of the institutions and the people, thoughtful people thinking about the future of humanity. And what we were lacking the processes, the programs, the capital, the guidance, the mentors to allow those innovative individuals to go on a supported journey to allow them to really take their idea from the lab to the market. And so that's why Canberra has become a hotbed of innovation.
I think it's a bit more than that too. I think you've done some work to make it better as well.
Agreed. So 15, 20 years ago, at the turn of the century, when the government was realizing that this technology wave could be leveraged for new industries and new companies and new employers in the city, they started to think about how do we do this. And in 1997, the federal government funded a program called the BITS Incubator Program. The ACT was successful in winning funding, and an entity, a group called Epicor was founded in 1997. It was based at the Clooney's Ross Syro facility first. And this was really our very, very first innovation ecosystem. And out of that, several successful companies came out of it. WinLab, which was a Syro spin-out that my wife and I also backed very early in 2003, went on to list on the ASX and is now one of the world leaders in wind development projects around the world. And several other companies came out of it. And we kind of proved that we could take good ideas with good entrepreneurs and commercially successful, make them successful. Unfortunately, the federal funding ran out in 2007, and we went through what I call a nuclear winter, where there was no one funding or commercializing ideas. And at the time, Serina, I joined the ANU to run their venture capital fund called ANU Connect Ventures. And there was a very progressive pro-vice chancellor of innovation there, Professor Mick Cardew-Hall, who I'd like to acknowledge as being one of the most progressive thinkers in our city. And he talked to me. We talked about how do we, re-energize the city. And so we went through a process of putting together a white paper for the ACT government about how do we make sure that we do this. And it included things like co-working, acceleration programs, incubation programs, venture capital, angel investment, and bringing all of the capability together. And I'm pleased to say that through those efforts, we birthed what is now known as the Canberra Innovation Network. And I work out of the Canberra Innovation Network regularly. I'm an entrepreneur in residence now there. But just to give your listeners some of the numbers, they run 250 events a year. 10,000 individuals go through their programs and activities each year. And we have a whole swathe of startups coming through our programs and city that are now employing literally hundreds of people in the city. So we are now, we've demonstrated that not only do we have innovation potential, we are delivering and creating world-class companies that are now employing hundreds of people in our city.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. And I must say too, when I left full-time employment in 2019, I kind of thought I would need to go somewhere like Sydney. I sort of had in my mind, maybe once a month I might go on a bus to Sydney and find some co-working place to kind of hang out in. And actually, I had a friend who was working at a particular co-working place as well. And I visited her and that looked really interesting. But I must say, it took me a while to realize that walking distance from my home, there was Canberra Innovation Network and it was pretty cool.
Yeah, proximity really matters, Serina. And Canberra has some unique attributes that very few cities around the world have. We're big enough to have critical mass, but we're small enough to only need one innovation network. And so the beauty of that is everybody has come together behind the Canberra Innovation Network. All the universities I talked about are foundation members of CBRIN. And so what has happened is everybody's gone, yes, it makes sense for us all to pool our resources, our networks, our capital, our efforts behind one institution. Most cities are not like that. So in Sydney, you can't find a single innovation ecosystem. Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, you can't find it. So we're fortunate that we're big enough to have critical mass, small enough to still make sense to have a focal point.
So I want to ask you about AI. Because that's the big topic at the moment. Even this morning, I was reading, a story about worrying about people's jobs and how many jobs are going, and it's definitely very disruptive. So, what is your views on this? How is it changing the landscape for entrepreneurs? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing?
It's my view on this is evolving, Serina. So as with any technology wave, and by the way, in my lifetime, this is the most disruptive technology wave I have ever seen. So first of all, we had the personal computer, then we had the internet, then we had the mobile devices. Now we've got AI sitting on top of all of that. This one is by far the most disruptive. And it can go either way for humanity. And I haven't resolved my own thinking about which way it's going to go. But for your listeners who maybe for themselves and for people that they care about in their family units and their friendship units, the one thing I would share with them, you must learn about and embrace AI. The people who are going to miss out, first of all, are the ones who say, I'm not going to use AI, because the person sat next to them is 10 times more productive because they are using AI and they are delivering greater value to whoever their employer is. And when they make those economic decisions as to who's the go forward team, it's the people who have embraced technology. So your listeners must find time to use tools like Google Gemini, Chat GPT, although I have some questions around the ethics of that company. The team at Anthropic, I have a lot of belief in their worldview and their attitude to security and safety. But you must try these tools. So try the tools. They're getting better every month, and I mean that. There's new versions coming out every month, and the progress is remarkable. So to answer your question, we are at the dawn of a new age, and already, Serina, most of our work is now being disrupted. Certainly white collar workers is being disrupted by AI assistants. And to share with your listeners, where I spend most of my time each day is in a Gemini prompt on a Chrome browser than in a Word document. So I used to, if I looked at my work hours, 8 hours, what am I spending most of my time doing? It would be in a word processor. It's not now. I'm in a Gemini prompt asking Gemini to answer questions for me, and then I take its answer, put it into a Word document, refine it, PDF it, and then send it off to whoever I'm sending it off to. So it is an amazing benefit in terms of productivity. The dangers, Serina, are real. So the problem is that, several of these companies are prioritizing profit and revenue over ethics, and that is extraordinarily dangerous for society. And I'm noodling on a concept, by the way, around, are politicians important anymore? Or are the founders of these AI companies that we use every day more important than our politicians? And I've got more thinking to do about that, but that's kind of my level of thinking, because they are so influential, the power of these platforms.
It definitely is, and it's like even yesterday it was on a different kind of learning platform, and they were talking particularly about grants for businesses and the fact now that it's so easy to put together a good quality grant as a business, and that's having an impact too on the assessors, because they're getting many more, much greater quantity of good quality applications. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're real, or that it's a real company, or that it's actually the concept's going to work.
Yeah, agreed. It's impacting every facet of life, Serina. You kindly mentioned my retirement channel at the beginning of this discussion,
And tell people
just
again where to find it.
Max.Trax.Relax, and it's called the Retirement Show Australia. But I use Gemini image creation to provide most of my background images. And you can put in now a prompt, for example, two multi-ethnic, multi-sex retirees playing ping pong in a retirement home. Literally 15 seconds later, there is the image. Now, 3 months ago, when I put that question in, Serina, and I know your son is a world-class ping pong player, what would come back
Table tennis, not
table
world
tennis.
class yet, but table tennis. He is competitive though.
Yeah. So you'd put that question in and it would come back, and the two players were at the same end of the table. And right, humans look at that and go, that's not how you play table tennis. You need one player at each end of the table, right? So clearly the engine 3 months ago didn't understand the rules of sport, right? So now if you put it in, they've upgraded it so that they've now loaded the rules of all the sports. So it actually puts people in the right place based on the rules of sport. That's happened in the last 90 days. So this thing is evolving so fast that it's remarkable. But my point here is, for me to have commissioned 30 images for my show, I would have had to go onto stock photo sites. I would have had to use search and, gone through the licensing of the image, et cetera, et cetera. I don't have to do that anymore. I just put in a prompt like I shared with you. There's the image. I save it as a PNG file and bang, it's in my video. I can produce, Serina, 30 images an hour. It's mind-numbing how fast this thing is. The real world practicality of AI is pervasive now.
Yeah, it most definitely is. And yeah, lots of challenges. We could talk all day, I think, just on AI.
We
But I
could.
wanted to ask you how it feels to actually enter retirement. Like, what does your day look like now? It sounds like you're still doing a lot of work. You're doing a lot of work on your channel. Sounds like you're still giving a lot of advice. But, what tips do you have for people who might be looking for retirement?
Throughout my career, Serina, I have had a philosophy of the leap of faith. And I typically do 4 or 5 years in a business before jumping off a cliff and moving into the next chapter. And part of that was because the technology waves keep coming thick and fast. And if you don't jump onto the next wave, you just end up on the beach, with sand in your undies and sand in your mouth because you've been dumped, right? Because the waves ended. The really good surfers are able to go back out and catch the next wave that's coming in. And I've tried to do that throughout my career. Well, guess what? Last September, I woke up on a Monday morning and had found myself in semi-retirement. Please don't call me retired. I'm not retired. I'm semi-retired. And I think it's an important distinction because semi-retirement is a transition to retirement. And it is shocking for an individual like me who comes to that point where you don't have your calendar back to back on the Monday morning and you don't have any activities or anything that you in particular should do, and you have to manage your day. And what I've learned, Serina, is that in fact there is no methodology for retiring in Australia. There is no courses, there's no guidance. Even if you go onto YouTube and try and educate yourself about retirement, plenty of videos around do I have enough money for retirement, which are, promoted by financial advisors. But is there a holistic methodology for planning and preparing for a healthy and productive retirement? No. So that's why I founded the Retirement Channel, to basically help people like me who are transitioning from a very productive work life into a life where they may be doing things in more of a portfolio way. So the first 3 episodes are live, and again, you can find them on my channel, Max.Trax.Relax. And I've come up with an 8-point methodology using AI around the elements of retirement. So yes, it's financial, it's mental health, it's physical health, it's social connection, it's volunteering, and the like. And each episode focuses on each of those facets. And what I've found is that people who are living the best retirement, Serina, they have worked out the right balance between volunteering, perhaps doing some consulting, mentoring, socializing, giving back to the community, educating themselves, etc. And the people who are living their best life are the ones who've got that balance right. And so what I'm trying to do in that channel is really provide guidance to people behind me who are coming up to this incredible decision of transitioning from full-time work into semi-retirement.
I don't know if you've heard of the FIRE movement, the financial independence retirement early movement, but it's particularly popular amongst millennials seeking to retire. Well, when they're early, but like often by the time they're 30. But one thing that often strikes me is that the ones that do retire don't really stop. They just transition to doing other things. But there's a lot of society backlash, particularly in the US, where people are like, well, you might have trained as an engineer and you've got all these skills. Like, don't just stop, but they might not have liked their job, so they're then able to do something else.
Yeah, I think living a purposeful life, Serina, whether you are doing it to sustain you and the people that are closest to you, or you're doing it because you love it, I think it's important that you have purpose. And living a purposeful life in retirement is really critical as well. And the people that retire without thinking about what they're going to do, they very quickly realize that a 40-hour week, 40 hours is a lot of time to fill. Yeah, you can go and play golf 2 times more than you did, but usually your buddies aren't there. So you might be
Yeah.
playing golf on your own, or walking on your own, or cycling on your own. And, you lack that social stimulation from company and conversation and camaraderie. And so it's really important that people think very carefully about transitioning into their retirement. And the episodes that I've released so far are really challenges to individuals to think through in each of the 8 modules of the retirement plan, making sure that they have thought through what they're going to do in each of those areas. And I give really relevant, active tips as to what you can do today to help improve your chance of living a successful, healthy, purposeful retirement.
Fabulous. Now, it is great. So if you're thinking of retirement or you are retired, highly recommend checking it out. Now, one final question for you. Do you have a Frugalista tip to share?
I do, Serina, and I am so proud of what you've done on this channel, helping people maximize every cent and dollar. I think it's just a wonderful thing that you're doing. So congrats to you and the community. But here's the one that I love the most. And my daughter introduced it to me. Here in the ACT, we have a bottle and can collection service, which is managed by the ACT government. And they pay you 10 cents for each eligible container that you recycle at predefined recycling centres. And I've really enjoyed over the last few months going down there with a sack full of eligible bottles and canisters to be recycled. And you come out with a little docket, and you can put the docket into the cash machine and you walk out with real cash. What I hadn't realized was that there were people who were way ahead of me who literally spend a lot of their free time going and finding other locations for these bottles that have value. And some people turn up with literally sack loads of bottles and cans that are going to recycle. And they may be, at there's 4 collection points in the place that I go to, and you watch them for 12 minutes stuffing all these things in, and they're walking away with hundreds of dollars. So what I love about this is, first of all, it's great for the environment. So we're recycling cans and bottles, and we're recycling them in a self-selected way. So there's human intervention in making sure they're selected, but it has incentivized the community to go looking for this hidden money that is in these cans and canisters that can be recycled. It's a really good program that is financially lucrative for the individuals who decide to really dedicate part of their week to the collection and the redemption of it. And that's my tip for your listeners. Make sure they go advantage of this service. That even if you only get $5.50 back on your first thing, it's $5.50 that you didn't have before.
Coffee, maybe. Coffee is going up, but if you're
There
lucky,
you go.
you might get a cup of coffee.
Very true.
Well, thank you so much for being my guest. It's just such an honor. So make sure to check out Nick's YouTube channel, which is Max.Trax.Relax. So thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you so much, Serina. Farewell.